Aloha, my name's Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is multi-generational wealth and building lasting legacies. My special guest is Harmon Kong, co-founder and chief wealth manager of Aprium Advisors, and the Forbes Books author, best-selling author of Values Over Valuables, Daring to Live the Life Money Can't Buy. Is that right? I got that one right.
Yeah.
With decades of experience in personal finance, Harmon is here to share how anyone can start to build generational wealth and a legacy that lasts from the heart. Thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Anna. It's such a joy and pleasure to be here. Aloha to you.
Well, thank you. So, to kick things off, you have over 36 years of industry knowledge in the financial industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and your vision behind founding or finding of Aprium Advisors?
Sure. I'm going to share a little bit of I guess my personal journey too, because that kind of leads into my professional journey since you asked, and thank you for asking. So, my father and mother grew up in Hawaii, not too far from you on the windward side. My dad grew up in Kaneohe. My mom grew up in Kailua. Um, but my dad went into teaching, so he got his graduate degree from University of Hawaii in marine biology and oceanography, and then uh, we moved eventually to the mainland where he continued to finish his studies and eventually became a college professor. But during this time, now I come from a family of five kids. I'm the third kid, and I had two older brothers. So what that means is that with a father on a teacher's salary and my mom who didn't work and stayed home with us, I pretty much got all my brothers' hand-me-downs. So I kind of said, well, okay, why would a guy who's so smart like that have so many kids on a teacher's salary? So, for me, it was more when I get older, I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to make money so that I can buy new stuff and not, wear my brother's old stuff. So that kind of ingrained in me a thought that I need to study something that I can do, build a lifestyle with. And I was young, so I discovered finance since my dad was a pro educator. He said, no matter what you do, you're going to have to go to college and get a degree so you can get a job. And I said, why? He said, because you can earn money. I said, why? He said, so you can get out of the house, right? I said, okay, that makes sense. So then I discovered that, oh, there's this thing called finance. So I figured practically, hey, if I study finance, I'm going to get a paycheck. And not only that, I'm going to know what to do with my paycheck. So it's kind of a natural thing for me. So when I graduated from college, I got a dream job. I ended up starting at a Boston-based money manager called Fidelity Investments, and I was one of the advisors at that firm. And I had worked there for several years, establishing their clientele here in Southern California. And then I also learned in that time, I don't know, somewhere around the fifth year, that I'm not a very good corporate guy. Kind of like you, I found that I think I'm an entrepreneur because I think I asked too many questions, and I was told that, you know, I'm the guy, wait, why are we? And then I was quickly cut off. Just
You're doing it
do
that way forever. That's why.
right, right.
Okay.
Just do
Me.
your job, right? Just do your job. This is how we do things. So when you ask too many why questions, it's one of those things where you start to dream, well, what if we did this or what if we did that? And I guess my vision of that and dreaming of that set me on a course to leave the corporate environment and start my own practice. So I left after almost 9 years of working there and decided, let's try to set up a private practice firm. And it was challenging. As you know, entrepreneur is not being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. But the basic vision was I wanted to work in an environment where I didn't have a corporate brand. I wanted to operate independently and objectively. And so my basic vision, and to work with a lot less clients, because at a big corporation like that, you're sort of inundated with a lot of families and households that you work with. And at the same token, you're kind of mandated to go get more. Um, and so you become reactive in your work and not proactive. So I used to sit at my desk and wonder, wow, what if you only had 50 clients instead of 500? And then that started me thinking, and what if we started to treat clients like family, ohana, right? Because I come from that background too. And wow, if you treat people like family and you didn't have so many, imagine how the service model could be very different. So that's what set me on a course to do it. And that was 27 years ago. And so here we are.
And what is tell me the Aprium is a very interesting name. What does it mean to you? Where how did it come up?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the very beginning, the company was actually named our last name because we didn't know what to name the company. And eventually, in a I guess the growth of a company is it's less about you and more about the team that you build. And so I wanted to get our name off the door. So we actually hired a branding management company to help us with that, and they come up with this word aprium. It's not a real word, right? It's a made up word from the Latin word a prime, which means exceedingly high to the highest degree. And that really is our service mantra
Ah,
and
a
how
prime.
we,
Okay, I see that.
yeah,
Okay.
it sort of became,
Ah.
it basically became kind of um, this call to everything we do in terms of our character, our competency, our service model has to be our absolute best because at the end of the day, we serve our clients and they deserve the very best. And I think most entrepreneurs in the service industry want to be great at what they do. 'Cause there are a lot of good firms, but how do you become great? And so we wanted it in our namesake. So that's why we picked it. It wasn't easy. I wouldn't say it was a overwhelming majority that said that's a good name because it's a made up name. It's not real. So
Well, some of our favorite brands have made up names, right? So I guess that, Google, I guess, is like that's actually a number, I think, right?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, you're
there's
right.
so many weird names out there that stick, right? So if you have a compelling story, which I think you do.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is the greatest challenge that families face when they're planning for long-term generational wealth and what is your vision for how to help them prepare for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the challenges, well, let's just talk about most people think the challenges are how do I make more money and pay less taxes? And I think that's kind of normal, right?
Sure.
If I can make
Taxes,
more,
right?
I mean, if I can make more and pay less taxes, then man, that's great. I'm going to build generational wealth, and what I've found, it's actually a lot more than that, and the more than that, and it's not to discount that. That's really important, but there's a lot more to that when you're talking about challenges with generational wealth, because um, we're talking about families here, and I think the biggest families have today is just how do we communicate better as a family. We live in a time where we're really connected yet disconnected at the same time, right?
Yes.
I raised 4 kids, and so I kinda grew up or watched them grow up being connected differently than how I connected when I was, their age. So, this virtual connectedness versus personally connected is a different thing, and families struggle with that. And secondly, families also don't typically talk about money. Um, and I know for my parents, we didn't really talk about money. The basic topic of money was, uh,
It wasn't
everything's
enough.
expensive.
Right, or it wasn't enough, or it was hard to get. I think a lot
Right.
that it's so you have to work really hard to make money. That's a conception
Yeah,
people hold on.
right.
Right.
And that's go to college, get a degree, you go make some money. Um, but it's just but the thing is life gets busy, right? Um, and it's very hard to just even have conversation or quality time with your family. Um, I know, for example, a lot of my friends you just had a hard time having sharing a meal together at dinner because one's going to soccer, one's going to dance, and I grew up having dinner with our family. My mother was very adamant that well, you don't eat until dad gets home, and sometimes dad worked late, so that meant we had to wait, till he got home and we're really hungry, but, um, so we did that for our kids too. We said,
Yeah.
family time, meal time is sacred, and that's really a chance to talk and have discussion and meet because the day goes by really quick and it's over, then you're back in the next day and so on and so on. So, I think that's the biggest challenge that families face when, just managing generational wealth, and I'll share some more statistics as we go on, but I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. The fundamental side of things of getting things done is actually the easy part.
I think it's interesting. So I'll give you a little side story. So I'm from Aspen, Colorado originally. and that's where I grew up. And I've been here in Hawaii for 20 years. My parents were always coming here on vacations. It's my father's favorite place to be. So every year of my life, I was here on holidays. But, what I saw, growing up in Aspen, and, there were people who actually lived there. My dad had a travel agency, Aspen Ski Tours, and which later became ski.com. But, there was around 8,000 people who lived in Aspen, and then it was all tourists. And then,
Right.
it was always affluent, but it became more and more affluent as time went on. And then now all the billionaires pushed the millionaires out and whatnot. But
Right.
what I saw that was really interesting, and my mom told me when I was young, that she's like, if you want to ruin your child's life, you give them a trust fund. And I was like,
Yep.
that's interesting. But I think that I saw that, and what can happen when you don't create the values, right, of how to, it's not just about getting this money and then I don't have to do anything, because then that we really don't have any purpose in your life. Right, is that kind of, part of tell me, I guess that'll bring me to my question on, like, what inspires you to write your values over valuables during to live the life money can't
Yeah,
buy?
you're kind of getting into the heart of the book and the heart of the work that we do, and you're absolutely right. I think when you look at let's talk about three generations, right? So you got my parents' generation, who is sort of borderline silent generation, which is our war veterans and baby boom. And what the baby boom and silent generation are familiar with are things like hard work, right? Sacrifice, self-discipline. How many times did we hear that? Do you know what I sacrifice so that you can have this? And so in my generation, which I'm the very last year of the baby boom generation, and the generation after, what we saw and is our parents working hard. We saw them make the sacrifices. We didn't make the sacrifices, we saw them make it. We didn't have the discipline. We're still learning, but we saw them. We
Right.
saw them work hard, have discipline, make sacrifices to provide for the family. So now, we grow up and we're kind of ingrained going, yeah, hard work, sacrifice, sacrifice. And so we gradually begin to experience it. But we also have had the benefit of a generation before us who maybe gave us opportunities that they didn't have. So, for example, my grandparents who lived in Hawaii, where my parents were raised, my grandfather was a mechanic, and my grandmother didn't work, and they had three kids, and my dad had to work while he was in high school. He eventually went to St. Louis High School there, and then he went to UH. But he tells me about how he had to work while he was in college the whole time, and then he was crazy enough to have three kids while he was still in graduate school,
Oh, wow.
which explains why I got all the hand-me-downs, right? So I saw that, but I didn't have to do that,
Right.
right? I got to go to college and have somewhat of a less struggle than he did. I don't know struggle like he did. I didn't have to have two jobs and raise three kids, you know. So now my kids are, I have three married now. Four of the three are married, and I wonder, okay, I want them to know hard work, but it's sort of a different kind of hard work. And then the question is like for the families with trust funds, and this is a topic I get into with a lot of my clients when we talk about values and finances, is they'll say, yeah, one of our core values, Harmon, is hard work. And I want to make sure that whatever happens when we're gone, they work hard. So anyway, let's talk about how to make more and build a great fortress and save taxes so that the family wealth can continue to grow and grow and grow. And so I said, you mean so it grow and grow so your kids don't ever have to work it? And then they go, wait a second. That's that's not exactly what I'm trying to do.
Counterintuitive, right? It's more,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But it's normal, right? We're really good at hiring the best lawyers and the best accountants and the best advisors and money managers. And then we build, I like to think of it as a castle, like our financial castle. And then we build this moat that our legal professionals and advisors teach us how to do, and we do it. And then we wonder why our kids don't want to work, or that third generation wants to just enjoy life. And is it the values that are going down? So
Right. I mean, when I think, yeah, there's all those strategies like where, I mean, I never had a trust fund, of course, but I was still I'm an only child, and my dad always said, if we die, you don't get all the money until you're a certain age. right?
Yeah.
Because kids make dumb decisions, or they get, or if I know some other family friends that I have, it says like if for their trust funds, it's like they had to work whatever they did in their own life, their trust fund would give them the same. So if they
Yeah.
were a teacher, and they got 60,000, okay, they got 60 from the trust fund. And so then it was an interesting model, I thought. So there's lots of different ways to I think make it so, because what is your life if you don't have any passion for creation?
Right. And you raise a good point. I think every family dynamic is a little different. And so I've seen the same thing where some families will put incentives to do certain things to achieve some sort of financial reward. But more commonly, what I see is when, because I read a lot of trust documents, even though I'm not a practicing lawyer, I'm more of a practitioner of the strategy of it. And so mostly what I see on it is documents that basically say when they're 18, they get their inheritance, or when they're 25 or whatever it is. It just says that it's typically age based. And so I'll say, well, this is a contingency and a hypothetical that you are not here, that you prematurely died early in some tragic thing or illness, and that your kid has a successor trustee that's going to manage the estate, but all of a sudden they're going to get it at a certain age. What if that's they're not ready for that?
Right.
To your point, what if, okay, I'm 20 years old and now I got millions of dollars or even a modest amount.
Right.
I mean, I think back if I was 18 and I got that, even if I was 25, I probably would have blew it.
Yeah, I mean, even if you thought you're responsible, it's easy to be swayed into different directions, and your brain's not mature enough to handle that kind of a responsibility, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like what you said, swayed, because I think that's often what happens. You're swayed by other influences. It could be a friend or a family member or even a spouse who they don't know what they don't know. And so it's if you're talking about building a strategy to preserve and protect the family, you do need to have some barriers on it. And what that looks like, I think it depends. Ideally, you hope that your adult kids have understood some responsibility of what they receive. But it also begs the question of why most lottery winners lose their lottery winnings. It's sort of the same thing. If you get a windfall inheritance, how have you equipped them to steward that for themselves? And so my book is really about that the valuables are important from this discussion, but more importantly is, are you passing down the values that go with it? And I believe if you do that, you'll have a much more likelihood of generational success in terms of wealth passing on. So I want to share a study that was done with you and your audience, is that there was a 20-year study on wealthy families. And what they discovered is that 70% of the wealth that's received by the next generation, 70% of them lose it. And then by the third generation, 90% lose it. That's pretty incredible,
Just
right?
still just now, like, and it's quite warm out. I was like, oh,
Yeah, I mean, when
I
you
think
think
about it,
about
it's like
it.
a lot shocking
So,
statistic.
so I was really intrigued by this, and so I called the people who did the study, and I said, "Wait a second, you said you studied um, wealthy families?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "Tell me about that." He said, "Well, you studied over 3,200 families over a 20-year period." And I said, "Well, I work with wealthy families, and here's what I know. We generally have lawyers and accountants and advisors and money managers." They go, "Yeah, that's correct." I go, "So you mean even with that, typically, even with that, these families didn't do well?" And they said, "Yeah." It's shocking, huh? And I was like, "Wow." And so that's kind of what struck me going, what is going on
Yeah,
here,
and
right?
these are what money managers taking money from them, or like what's happening? That's the shade.
No, it's just,
Yeah.
maybe they didn't have money management, but they were making bad financial decisions.
Yeah.
The next generation, they didn't really, um, they just making bad decisions,
Maybe they
right?
don't understand the value of money too. Like, and when you think about like $100, and you're like, oh, that has a value to me. It means something. But if you have, if you grow up rich, and oh, take 100 instead of like, when I want to go out to dinner with my friends, my dad gave me like a 10 or a 20, right? If you're given 100, now they don't think of it like it's the same. Oh, what's $10,000? Well,
Yeah,
oh, if you had to earn that $10,000 yourself, you might think differently, right?
yeah,
It's being given to you, kind of, right? Is that the
right,
mindset?
yeah. There's definitely the value of money that isn't necessarily appreciated because You can ask this question to yourself as more of a rhetorical question: Is it better to inherit money or earn it? Um, if you earn it, it's quite different than if you receive it. Um, but I also think
Hey,
there's a
earning
lot.
money, I think that the I mean, of course, it's always nice to inherit, but, what I'll, like, always say about, what I appreciate about my parents is, that I was always expected to succeed. They paid for my schools, they helped me, like, move to Hawaii was expensive, and, I got all the tools to succeed. I was expected to fly on my own, but I did, and I pushed the boundaries, and I started companies, and, and I wouldn't have had that appetite if I had known that if it didn't work out, I would be on the streets.
Right,
Right?
right.
And so that
Eh,
pushed me to become what I am now, right? And
Yeah,
just my own. But, I think that that's the greatest success is knowing that, what, you have the safeguard that you can fail and it's going to be okay. You might be bruised emotionally from it, but you're not going to end up down at the food center, the homeless shelter. And
yeah,
that's the best benefit that you can give to your kid, because then they can really become who they were meant to become.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think what you're speaking to is that your parents gave you opportunity. And, yeah, I would agree with you that my parents gave me opportunity. They gave me opportunity to go to school and to dream that I can migrate upward. Um, but I guess the challenge maybe with some families, what if you're already upward? Um, and is going to school, for example, about earning a paycheck? I mean, in some families, it's not. So how do families might struggle with why is education important if like when for me, education was important because my dad said, it's gonna help you get a job and provide for yourself. Well, what about education just for the sake of education? Um, if the money's already there. The other thing I would note is, it's not uncommon that families, I think, fight a lot, sometimes over money. And I think if I when anytime when I'm in a room, I ask, does anyone have a story where family was in the middle of a family dispute or family battle, and it's still one of the top things that break relationships, both in marriage and in families. And so sometimes that is a reason why the wealth is not preserved. Um, there's a number of things why that happens. But for the last 15 years, I've been really trying to understand what's causing this? And just by talking to my clients and asking different questions like, do you guys talk about money with your kids or your adult kids? And a lot of them say no, because I don't want them to, if I tell them what we have, I said, I'm not saying you have to tell them what you have, but they're afraid because they didn't talk about it with their parents. And then they're afraid, well, if I tell them too much, they're going to become lazy and maybe they don't want to work hard. See, yeah, but you guys take fancy vacations every year. I think they kind of know something's up.
Right.
Um, so it's like the elephant in the room. But so what I'm an advocate of is just having meetings. And in my book, I talk about values and what your values are. Do you know what they are? And I just believe everyone has some core values because it's the way we process information. It's sort of our lens of life, Anna. How we make decisions, how we behave, how we relate to people, and we don't always write them down though. What are they? And so does our family know what our values are? So in your business and in my business, we have core values, right? We have guiding principles. As an entrepreneur, you want to create a culture centered around values. And second to that is a corporation or an organization has a vision for what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yes.
Then you also create a corporate mission statement, like what are we doing, and how are we going to do this? And then lastly, you meet with your team regularly, right? Because you want to know, are we fulfilling the mission? Are we staying true to our values? And my question is really what I'm trying to get my reader to understand is we do this professionally. Why aren't we doing it with our families? And I think if we do this more and more regularly, we will have a greater success of beating that 20-year study that says it doesn't last. Um, so that's really kind of the crux of it. And then, I provide some resources and tools to help a family get started.
Oh, that's a really great concept. And then, almost kind of, we do a lot of branding exercises for the agency. And I always thought it was interesting that, we do a branding exercise, but, really, a lot of times we don't go back to them for years. but the company has evolved, right? Just like it should, as an entity, just like a person. So how
Yeah.
often are you, going back to this, document or and seeing does it still match? Like, have our values changed the family? Is it like an annual thing?
Yeah.
There's seminar. What are your recommendations for people to get started?
Yeah. So I kind of use myself in that regard. We just did ours, redid our values, um, 2 years ago, and we had our values done, 20 years ago when the kids were really ill, and they really haven't changed much. So our core values are family, community, generosity, service. Those are some of our core and faith. So those are our core values, and really, what it does by writing it down. It helps our family and ourselves understand how is what we're about to do related to these five core values.
Right.
And I think when you start to think of it that way, it's a little more intentional, right? Just like how you operate your business and many entrepreneurs you talk to, it's how do you stay true to that? And when you're not true to that, that's when you realize, hey, we're drifting.
Right.
This is not who we are,
That's the
and we need to.
North Star, right?
Right.
Like
We
he's a match. Like
right.
not
We
invest in it because they also it's kind of the same like the economic social governance. I do a lot of
Yes.
solar work and if I might have solar and I might feel good about that, but if I'm buying from or the company could have solar, but if they're buying from they're getting their equipment from a company that is using fossil fuel trucks and they're driving them over, or they're buying, products in a place where they're using child labor. Well, then I'm not meeting my
Yes.
economic global, you know, regulations. Right. So what is the trickle out of like where you spend your money and how you live your life? Right. Is it meeting all your values?
Yeah. No, you're right on. I mean, this is all you know, normal nature for you.
Well,
You get this. This is great. Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly it. Is we're very good at it in our corporate setting and in our businesses. And just, imagine if we put that same effort into our family. So, one of the things I say in the book, and just it's more of sort of vision casting of your family is that. So a couple years in a row, my company got an award for the best place to work. And, it's a poll and survey taken by the employees. And it's questions like, do you feel respected? Do you feel heard? Do you understand the vision of the firm? Do you understand your role? I mean, all these things. Do you get support? Are you encouraged to be your best? All these things. And so to me, that was a really proud moment to know that my employees like working here.
yeah.
So my question and rhetorical thought is, what if you got an award for the best family to live in?
Ooh.
What would that look like, Anna? Right?
Wow. I'm seeing all kinds of things, you know?
Yeah. Your mind starts to go, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, let's break. What would it look like? You
Well,
know, to see someday your kids can look back and say, man, I came from a great family.
yeah.
I love my origin story. Um, so, that's kind of the big dream. But I think you can't get there unless if you don't know what your values are, and you don't have a vision, you don't have a mission, and you never talk, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not from, it's like did they have the talks about the different ways people show love, right? There's
Yeah.
5 languages of love or whatnot, and then, I
A
think
great book.
we've all seen a lot of especially with very powerful people, and they work a lot, and, their language of love is gift giving, right? So,
Yeah.
"Oh, bought them that Mercedes," that shows them I love them. Well, but then they're not understanding the value of that and what it really means, and do they really gonna remember anything about dad other than they gave him this car?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I love that book, by the way, because when our kids were little, we did their love languages to figure out, okay, some are words of affirmation, some are acts of service. Mine's always been quality time. So I can get in the car and drive for hours as long as the family's in the car with me. And so so we would take road trips. Of course, in Hawaii, you'd have to go around the island a couple times.
Right.
So
It's we're so
yeah.
persnickety now too, like, whenever, it's so funny, I went to college in Boston and prep school in California, and, 2-hour drive is nothing in the East Coast,
Yeah.
and people do that just to commute, and you think, "Oh, or I'm going to the city, it'll take me," and then when you move to Hawaii, you're like, "Oh my god, North Shore is, like, an hour away."
Right.
Like that's we're talking far away.
That's far. Yeah, no, it's funny when I'm there, I go there pretty frequently. So when I'm visiting my cousins or whatnot, there I tell them where I am and I go, I can come to you. I go, well, what? That's really far. That's way down there. I'm like a half an hour away. I drive that far to go to work every day. What are you talking about?
As long as you're not in traffic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If as long as you avoid that rush hour traffic, you're good. But yeah, it's great.
So, what trends in wealth management are you most excited about?
What trends
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I know what that we were talking about AI and, high tech things
yeah.
are moving quickly. Are there things that are changing in wealth management and what excites you the most?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think AI is definitely gonna change a lot of businesses, but I'm gonna share something I think that I'm excited about and I think is really going to be impactful as the years unfold. First off, is that um, there's over the next 15, 20 years, there's a tsunami of wealth that's going to transfer from one generation to next. And Fortune did a study just last year that said it's somewhere between 85 to 129 trillion in assets that will go from one generation to the next. So we're never I mean, it kind of makes sense if you look back in the decades. Asset prices have appreciated a lot, right? So real estate portfolios, if you're a real estate investor, stock market, business assets, they've all swelled to an incredible level. But anyway, that's going to go from one generation to the next. And the question is, what are they going to do with it? And that's why I think this topic is so critical because one, generational wealth doesn't typically last. Number two, a lot's going to go from one generation to the next. And actually, number three, I'll cite is that our academics haven't really done a good job teaching our youth financial responsibility, right? And I think as a parent, we would all agree that wouldn't it be great to raise kids who are financially responsible, right? That money doesn't
And
grow
I'm
on
sure you how to
trees.
balance a checkbook. I mean, here we are, we're teaching kids, French or whatever, right? Some language. And what about, I mean, I went to business school, so I
Yeah.
will appreciated that I got to learn a little bit of everything before, getting my
Yeah.
degree. But what about like how to read a credit card statement? What
Yeah.
APR actually means, I mean, how many kids commit suicide because they get their first credit card and they don't understand it? I mean,
Yeah.
God, this literacy is you're completely right. I mean, how to
Yeah.
pick taxes. What is
Yep.
it, like how to invest in a future so you get the generational wealth. If you
Yeah.
keep buying items, you'll never get there, right? I think you're
Yeah.
right.
None of my kids know how to write a checkbook. They don't have checkbooks. They use Venmo and Zelle and all these things. It's a different time, but I think our academics haven't done enough to prepare our kids. And I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll get to your questions. But my daughter declared herself as a social work major, and I thought to myself, "Oh no, I spent too much time on the values and not the valuables." So I know, oh, she's gonna be living at home forever. I don't know anything about social work anyway. So she went to school in Texas at Baylor University, and she had her academic appointment. We went for the orientation, and then she went to go see an academic counselor who's going to map out her full 4 years. So I decided, can we go in the meeting? And they kind of looked at me and my wife and said, no, that's usually for her because she's an adult. She's this is her meeting. I said, I know, I won't say it. I'll just sit in the back. So the counselor, he brings in two chairs, sits in the back, and Haley's talking to him on the desk, and they're talking about this schedule for the next 4 years, and I couldn't help myself, Anna. I said, "Excuse me, I have a question." He's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" I said, "Is there a way that she could take like a intro to business or like a basic economics class or something?" And he looked at me like, "Do you want her to graduate in 4 years or 5 years?" I said, "Okay, never mind. I mean, could you 4 years sounds good."
Substitute one of these things that we don't need, like nuclear science or whatever they're teaching them now, or physics, maybe. I don't know, like
Yeah.
algebra. That maybe like
Right, right.
something.
So, there wasn't a lot of room in there for any kind of basic business class because and then she got a graduate degree. I mean, thankfully, she's great. She's married engineer, and she has finance. I had to teach, but my point is, we have to take responsibility and teach it to our kids.
Yeah.
So, it's just something. So the literacy, we can talk about that for hours on that. But to your question is what I see as something really exciting in our space in this generational wealth is really the rise of women, because the rise of women increasing their share of influence and affluence. Um, and here's the interesting thing is that all this generational wealth that's going to pass from one generation to the next, people are focusing on the kids. What they don't really realize is it's going to go to mom first, right? Mom's going to be the responsible one before it goes to the children. And so we're seeing this unfold, and we've been seeing it unfold in our own business ourselves because since we've been around a long time, most of the men who came to us with their wives are gone. I mean, they've died. I mean, women live longer than men, right?
Sure.
So, so, and there's not a lot of women in the finance industry, and so there's that, but it's getting better. So the president of my company is a woman, and we recognized this over 15 years ago. So we started this initiative called WOW, and WOW stands for Women of Wisdom. And the initiative is about educating and encouraging and empowering our women clientele. Now it's kind of grown into some community thing where people who aren't clients come to our events, but we bring in speakers and different topics. And sometimes they're not financial because women want to talk about things that women want to talk about. And I don't allow any of the men to go or the husbands. And we did a meeting when we kicked it off 15 years ago. Some of the men showed up, and I had a really good client who's a woman told me, "Hey, if you really want to do this, you can't have the men there because they make it unsafe." I go,
Right.
"Unsafe?" I go, "Why?" He goes, "Well, they take over the meeting."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. They're the ones asking all the questions.
Or not
And
paying attention and like, like on their phones or like, bringing the whole energy down.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, great. So we started doing that. And here's what I think is exciting, and you might find this funny, but I honestly, this is I think the women are going to rule the world one day.
We
Yeah.
all hope so.
But
Yeah.
it's true. It's true. And why I say that because again, they're going to be holding the purse strings. So they're going to yield great influence over the next 15, 20 years. And I used to, I don't know if you read Melinda Gates' book, Moment of Lift, but she kind of talks about her journey, but I've always thought, wow. So Melinda, when she was married to Bill, she was running the foundation, one of the biggest private foundations on the planet because it's for one of the wealthiest guys on the planet. But what was interesting is when they started the Giving Pledge several years ago, where billionaires signed away to give half their money over the course of their life. Um, Warren Buffett signed it. It was really Warren and Bill Gates that signed it. But Warren Buffett said, "Well, all my money is going to go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation." Well, Melinda's what 9 years younger than Bill. So my thought was back then was Melinda's going to be holding the purse strings of two of the most wealthiest people on the planet.
Wow.
What does that mean? And that's just one isolation of somewhat of great wealth, but you're going to see uh, areas of this in different parts of the country in the world. And so,
Wait, didn't Warren Buffett wasn't he the one that said that over the next 5 to 10 years, one of the greatest shifts in or creations of generational wealth will happen from the electrification of the country, right? Even more than we made when we went from horses to fossil fuels, even more so in this next transition.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's exciting. Women's influence in the industry and wealth, yielding wealth and their affluence. What's that going to look like? I think they're going to have a much stronger voice at places where maybe they didn't have a voice. And so, as a company, if we're not intentionally serving that community of women who are in these positions, like our divorcees or widows, then I think we're missing something really
Yeah,
significant.
and I also think I really like that because I think maybe even some of these women, like they might have an educational gap. They might not even be aware of their power, or what they can do with it, because they might have the come from the mindset that they should be saving money or even at that scale. But now with all these radical things that are happening in the world, you know, I always wonder why aren't the billionaires stepping up to create that? Why should we're worried, but they're all crying about the government shutting it down. Well, there's enough wealthy people that if they're passionate about keeping a radio station going, the USA radio station or whatever it was called, shouldn't there be someone who can afford to fund that?
Yeah, right. Well, you raise an interesting made an interesting comment is I work with a lot of widows who have very strong financial balance sheets, more than they need. And so but they don't know they have enough,
Right.
you know. because they're coming from, and also there's a guilt of spending without the husband there.
Yep.
And I have one client, she actually passed on, but very wealthy. She used to call me and say, "Hey, do you think I could get a new couch?" I'm like, um, "You're asking me if you can buy a new couch?" "Yeah. You think it's okay?" "Absolutely. Buy 10 of them." And she would call me things like, "I want to take a trip. Do you think it's okay I can spend this money on a trip?" Like, absolutely take all your family on the trip too. You need to start spending this money. But she was just kind of in that mindset of no, save, 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 because you never know what's going to be enough.
That's how she grew up, and it's hard to it's hard to let
Or,
the
or
change your thought, right?
or maybe she never had that responsibility to make those spending decisions, right? Because there's a generation that sort of the men felt, well, I earned it, I'm in charge of it.
But there's also an idea of worthiness. A lot of people like I do a lot of manifesting and watch, Dr. Lewis Howes and whatnot, and a lot of people come on there and they talk about that people don't think that they're worthy of it, right? Even though they have it, they don't think that they deserve it. And that affects their buying behavior or ability to, like that's like she can do you think she can? Like, does she deserve to go on this trip? That's
Yeah.
just it's not about the money. It's like that you deserve to have this nice object and believing that you're worthy of it, right? And
Yeah.
missing gap for a lot of women in general.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. There's definitely an element of that. And I've seen that too in the women clients that we work with is almost like a guilt or shame that I'm spending this, but he's not here to enjoy it. And almost like I can't have too much fun or I can't do this for myself. And so I think we're in a unique position because we're in the front line of that in terms of our work. Because as you know, money is not something people share with everyone. But as a
Also
wealth
about
man,
different type of where you come from too, right? In Asia and in Sweden. My mom's Swedish. In Sweden, you don't talk about how much money you make. It
yeah.
would Will be like, someone will get a new job and they'll be like, "Oh, what is your salary?" And everyone will that's totally fine, right? I mean, to say, my mom was horrified when she first moved to America that people would ask such a question, you know?
Yeah,
But I think, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time we live in.
yeah. No, I think that's an exciting trend I
It is
see
exciting.
unfolding.
I'm excited
It
about
is
that.
yeah, it's gonna happen over our lifetime, so we're gonna witness this. And I'd say the second thing I think that's really worthy to kinda talk about is this space of, sort of social impact, right? Social impact investing, and I think it fits with this younger generation that they want something more than just making money or to invest in things that just make a profit. They also wanna know that it has some social purpose.
Yes.
Uh, like, is it good for the environment? So it's a little more conscious of not making money at all cost mentality. It's more the cost of making money is what we need to think about. And I think this other generation is much more attuned to that. And you're beginning to see sort of Wall Street adopt social impact businesses that are for profit but have a social positive impact. And because a lot of this isn't driven by Wall Street so much, it's driven by the investor.
At that
It's a-
EGS score, right? We type
yes,
environmental
yes,
governance score, right?
yeah. Yeah, it matters. I mean, your business is a great example of, you doing solar, you're contributing to a clean environment. So there's a generation that says, yeah, I want to be involved in something that is going to do something good. That's going to affect me and my future family, that is going to, I'm going to leave a positive footprint. So I think that's exciting because I think as that demand continues to grow, it's going to open up capital markets and it's going to allow more investment deal flow, and, I'm excited about that because I think we're gonna have some positive changes just on the if you follow the money trail, where's money going? And even
I sure hope so because I have a 11-year-old daughter, and that's actually one of the reasons why I was so passionate about solar. It's just we a lot of people I know they say, oh, with the we're not going to make it. I'm like, no, we have to make it. I have to be able to do everything in my power. It's just me, but my power to be able to tell my daughter that I did everything I could to try to make it better for her.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you, and that's exciting. So those 2 things, I think. There's a lot that can be said about technology and the capital markets or whatnot, but to me, those are the biggest things that I see unfolding right before our eyes.
Well, I love those two examples. Thank you for that. It's very positive on this Aloha Friday. But we're actually recording on Aloha Friday, and then we always release our podcast on Aloha Friday too. So it's a little double whammy for us. I like.
I should have put my Aloha shirt on, right?
There
Because
you go.
there is a real Aloha Friday in Hawaii where everyone wears their Aloha shirts to work,
That's
right?
that's right.
So,
Yeah, they actually just opened a new Dave& and Buster's, and it's, like, amazing. It's down at Ala Moana Shopping Center where the
yeah,
Sheriff used to be, and,
right.
it's, there's been a lot of parties down there and, talking about having, like, an aloha day and whatnot, but
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Well, that brings back memories when you say Ala Moana because, as a kid, we used to go to Ala Moana Park every weekend for the barbecue family picnics, right?
absolutely. They still
We were
have 'em.
there, or if we were on that side of the island, we'd be there or Kapiolani Park. But being my mom was from Kailua, we were typically always on that side.
It's so beautiful over there. I don't
Oh
go
yeah,
often enough.
yeah,
Well, I think, we're at the end of our time here. Is there anything else? Well, I guess, let me see if there's anything in here I missed. I think we really talked about a lot of things. So I guess I'll say, is there anything else you want to add before we conclude?
yeah. Well, thank you first off for having me on your show, Anna. It's been a real honor and a privilege to talk to you. And um, so my book can be bought on Amazon anywhere. It is in a Kindle version as well as Audible. The one thing that I do have on my author website at harmonkong.com is a family playbook that essentially puts some of the worksheets that are in the back of the book into a PDF fillable so that there's a Discover My Values worksheet. Um, and what's fun about that is you can take it individually, or if you're married, you can take it with your spouse. And sometimes I've heard families doing it together with their kids, and then they're trying to identify their core guiding principles as a family. And then it also has worksheets on how to draft a vision statement, how to draft a mission statement, and then lastly, some tips on how to hold your first family meeting, because I think that's really what's missing today is families just not talking. But you have to kind of figure out what are we going to talk about. Um, and probably the most common question I get is it too is it too early or too late to start? And no, it's never too late. It's never too early. You might not have an agenda when they're young because kids have short attention span. The point is not the content, is that the joy of gathering together. So those are available for free for download on there's a you can get it on the book as well. So
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for sharing those resources. I can't wait to read a copy of the book myself and do that meeting with my daughter. So
yeah,
appreciate
great, thank you.
those thoughts. So for all my listeners, please join me next week as we interview another industry expert and a topic to help you succeed on and offline. You can find the podcast on all your favorite streaming services: Amazon, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, YouTube. And to learn more, you can visit thecovertcode.com. I'll see you in the pixels. Aloha.